The candles were wrong. Alexander Blackwood stood in the marble foyer of his Seattle mansion, briefcase still in hand, and felt his jaw tighten. 14 hours of merger negotiations. 14 hours of playing chess with men who thought they could outmaneuver him. 14 hours of holding his composure while discussing the fate of a $2 billion deal. And he came home to vanilla. The smell hit him first. Sweet, cloying, suffocating. Where there should have been cedarwood, there was this saccharine assault on his senses. His fingers flexed around the leather handle of his briefcase. Once. Twice. The kind of controlled movement that meant someone was about to have a very bad evening. Patricia stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway. Head housekeeper. Came highly recommended by 3 senators and a Supreme Court justice. 62 years old with a practiced smile and the kind of confidence that came from 30 years of managing wealthy households. Her smile was already faltering. She could read the room. Good for her. Mr. Blackwood. Her voice was smooth, professional. I thought the house could use something warmer. Vanilla is known to reduce stress. Studies show that the scent can lower cortisol levels by up to 15%. And given the long hours you've been working, I thought, and who asked you to think? The words came out quiet. Alexander never raised his voice, never needed to. Volume was what weak men used when they lacked precision. He had learned long ago that silence was sharper than shouting, that coldness cut deeper than heat. Patricia's smile died completely. I beg your pardon? Alexander set his briefcase down on the console table. The marble was Italian, cost more than most people's cars. The table had belonged to his adoptive mother. She had loved beautiful things. She had also loved cedarwood candles. The cedarwood candles, he said, each word measured, each syllable a small blade. Where are they? We disposed of them, sir. They were nearly empty, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to refresh the scent palette of the home. Vanilla has broader appeal, and with the upcoming charity gala, there's that word again. He looked at her directly for the first time since entering. Patricia was a tall woman, imposing in her crisp uniform, but she seemed to shrink under his gaze. Consideration, Alexander continued. His voice never changed pitch, never wavered. Care, thoughtfulness, all wonderful qualities in a housekeeper, Patricia. But misplaced consideration is a form of noise, and I despise noise. Mr. Blackwood, I was only trying to— You're fired, she blinked. Excuse me? You're fired, all of you. Patricia's face went through several colors. Confusion, disbelief, then a flash of anger that she quickly suppressed. She was professional enough to know that anger wouldn't change anything. Not with Alexander Blackwood. All of us. Her voice was smaller now. The entire household staff. I want everyone out within the hour. You'll receive your severance packages by morning. Non-disclosure agreements are already in your contracts. Use them. He picked up his briefcase and walked past her toward the stairs. Behind him, he could hear the sudden, frantic whispers as word spread through the house. The cook, the cleaning crew, the groundskeeper who had been trimming roses in the garden. 5 people, 5 careers ended in the time it took to change a candle. Alexander didn't look back. By morning, the story had spread through Seattle's elite circles like wildfire. Eleanor Whitmore heard it first at her charity luncheon. She was in the middle of her second glass of wine when Margaret Chen leaned across the table, eyes bright with gossip. Candles! Eleanor repeated the word like she was tasting something bitter. Her fork hung suspended halfway to her mouth, a piece of arugula dangling from the tines. He fired 5 people over candles. I heard it was because they rearranged his books, Margaret said. Margaret Chen made it her business to know everyone else's business. She had a network of sources that would make the CIA jealous. Dorothy Hayes shook her head. No, it was definitely the candles. My daughter's roommate's cousin works at the staffing agency. Apparently the man is impossible. Impossible, Eleanor agreed. She set down her fork and reached for her wine. Absolutely impossible. Gorgeous, yes. Obscenely wealthy, certainly, but completely unhinged. He's not unhinged. The voice came from the end of the table. Victoria Lane, wife of a tech CEO. The only woman at the table who had actually met Alexander Blackwood in person. She had sat next to him once at a fundraiser, 20 minutes of conversation that felt like 20 hours. The other women turned to look at her. He's not unhinged, Victoria repeated. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. He's empty. Eleanor frowned. Empty? You can see it in his eyes, like looking into a room where someone turned off all the lights and forgot to come back. The table fell silent. It was one thing to gossip about a billionaire's eccentricities. It was another thing entirely to acknowledge the hollowness beneath them. The observation was too precise, too uncomfortable. It made them all feel complicit in something they didn't want to name. Eleanor cleared her throat and changed the subject. 300 miles south, in a cramped office above a laundromat in Portland, a woman named Helen Marsh was having a very different conversation. The office smelled like detergent and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. The walls were covered with filing cabinets that had seen better decades. A single window looked out onto a street where rain was beginning to fall. November in Portland meant rain. Lots of it. Helen slid a folder across her desk. The folder was thick, too thick for a normal client file. She had been doing this job for 30 years. She knew what normal looked like. This wasn't it. Seventh agency in 18 months, she said. Her voice had the kind of weariness that came from dealing with difficult clients in impossible situations. The man is a walking disaster. Emma Grace didn't reach for the folder. She sat with her hands folded in her lap. Posture straight but relaxed. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a gray cardigan over a white blouse, jeans that had been washed too many times, sneakers that were clean but worn. Nothing about her demanded attention. That was the point. What did the others do wrong? Emma asked. Helen leaned back in her chair. It squeaked. Everything in the office squeaked. They existed. Emma's expression didn't change. She had a face that gave nothing away. Helen had always appreciated that about her. In 5 years of working together, Emma had never once caused a problem. Never complained, never asked for special treatment. Clients barely remembered she had been there. In the domestic service industry, that was the highest compliment. Alexander Blackwood doesn't want a housekeeper, Helen continued. He wants a ghost, someone who cleans his house, maintains his schedule, anticipates his needs, without ever being seen, heard, or acknowledged. Then why does he keep firing people? Because they keep trying to be helpful, to be noticed, to be human. Helen tapped the folder with one finger. But you're different, Emma. In 5 years, I've never had a single complaint about you. Not one client has ever mentioned you at all. The corner of Emma's mouth lifted, just slightly. I like being invisible. Good, because that's exactly what this job requires. Helen pushed the folder closer. Don't let him see you. Don't let him hear you. Don't leave any trace that you were ever there. Can you do that? How much does it pay? Helen named a figure. Emma's eyes widened. Just for a moment, then her face went smooth again. Professional. But Helen had seen the reaction, had seen the way Emma's fingers tightened in her lap. $120,000 a year, plus housing, plus benefits. For a woman working 3 jobs just to keep a studio apartment in a neighborhood where gunshots were background noise, it was life-changing money. I'll do it, Emma said. As she reached for the folder, her sleeve rode up slightly. Helen caught a glimpse of something on her finger. A ring, but not a normal ring. It looked homemade. Copper wire twisted around what appeared to be a piece of sea glass. Pale blue. Worn smooth by time or ocean or both. Helen filed the observation away and said nothing. Some things were none of her business. The Blackwood estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, all steel beams and floor-to-ceiling glass. A fortress designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Emma arrived at 5:30 in the morning, when the November fog still clung to the cliffs and the mansion looked like something rising from a Gothic nightmare. She parked her car in the service area, a Honda Civic with 200,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. The car looked wrong next to the Mercedes and Tesla in the garage. But Emma had stopped caring about looking wrong a long time ago. The previous staff had left in chaos, dishes piled in the sink, dust gathering on surfaces thick enough to write in, a half-eaten meal abandoned on the kitchen counter, growing something green and fuzzy. Emma got to work. She removed her shoes at the door, replaced them with thick wool socks that silenced her footsteps on the hardwood floors. She had learned this trick years ago. Rich people didn't want to hear their help moving through the house. They wanted the work done by magic. Emma could do magic. She found the storage room on the second try. Inside, pushed into a corner like someone had tried to make them disappear, was a half-empty box of cedarwood candles. The scent hit her immediately. Rich, warm, familiar in a way she couldn't quite place. She carried the box through the house, placed the candles exactly where the vanilla ones had been, matched the wax levels to the rings they had left on the surfaces. It took her 20 minutes to get everything perfect. Then she noticed the lights. Too harsh. Clinical white that probably triggered migraines. She had read the business profiles while researching Alexander Blackwood. Forbes had mentioned his chronic headaches. Bloomberg had speculated about his insomnia. Neither publication had connected it to his environment, but Emma had spent years learning to read between lines. She found the smart home system. It took her another 15 minutes to figure out the controls. Then she went room by room, shifting the lighting from cold white to warm amber. 20% reduction in intensity, enough to make a difference, not enough to be obvious. In the kitchen, she placed a glass of water infused with cucumber and lemon beside the coffee maker. Not to replace his coffee, just to offer something gentler, something that might help with the headaches. By the time she finished, the sun was setting over the Pacific. She had worked for 11 hours. She had not eaten. She had not sat down. She had not made a single sound. She left through the service entrance and disappeared. Alexander came home at 8. He stopped in the foyer. For a long moment, he didn't move. Just stood there with his briefcase in hand, breathing in air that smelled like cedarwood. Like memory. Like something he had been missing without knowing he was missing it. The lights were different, softer. The entire atmosphere of the house had shifted in a way he couldn't quite name. It felt less like walking into a museum and more like walking into somewhere he might actually want to be. He walked through the room slowly, searching for evidence of the intruder. There was none. No fingerprints on the polished surfaces, no indentation on the cushions, no lingering scent of perfume or shampoo. In the kitchen, he found the water, cucumber and lemon. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he drank it in 3 swallows. The cool liquid soothed his throat, eased the headache that had been building behind his eyes since the morning meeting. In the living room, he discovered that the cedarwood candles had returned. Not new ones, the old ones, the ones that mattered. He lit one and watched the flame dance. Something stirred in his chest, something old and buried and dangerous. He pushed it down, locked it away. He was good at that. That night, Alexander fell asleep on the sofa without pills or whiskey. He simply lay there, watching the candle flicker, and let the silence carry him away. 2 weeks passed. Alexander never saw his new housekeeper. She was a ghost, just as Helen had promised. The evidence of her existence was everywhere. The perfectly pressed shirts, the fresh flowers that appeared and disappeared without explanation, the way his coffee was always ready at exactly 6:47 in the morning. But the woman herself remained invisible. Alexander found himself watching for her, setting traps, coming home early, leaving late, hoping to catch a glimpse. She always seemed to know, always seemed to be one step ahead, always vanished before he arrived. It was driving him insane. He pulled up the security feeds on his laptop, studied them frame by frame, but she moved through the blind spots like she had memorized the camera positions. He only ever caught fragments. A gray sleeve disappearing around a corner, the back of a dark ponytail, a shadow moving across hardwood. "You're obsessed," Julia said. His PR director stood in the doorway of his office, arms crossed, wearing an expression that said she was about to tell him something he didn't want to hear. Julia Montgomery was 45 years old, brutally honest, and the only person on his staff who wasn't afraid of him. "I'm observant," Alexander replied without looking up from his monitor. "You're watching security footage of your own house like a stalker." "I'm ensuring quality control." Julia walked into the office and sat down in the chair across from his desk without being invited. "The board is worried about you." "The board is always worried about me. This time they have reason." She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward him. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all showing the same headlines, the same hashtags, the same narrative. Billionaire psychopath fires 5 people over candles. The cruelty of the ultra-wealthy. When having everything means caring about nothing. It's trending, Julia said, and not in a good way. Alexander glanced at the screen, then back at his monitor. I don't care about trending. You should care about investors. They're getting nervous about the erratic behavior narrative. There's nothing erratic about expecting competence. There's everything erratic about firing an entire household staff over scented candles, Alex. She only called him Alex when she was serious. The tech venture merger is hanging by a thread. The board wants to see stability. They want to see you engaging with the community. They want a show, Alexander finished. They want you to host the charity gala. He finally looked up from his monitor. No, it's not a request, it's a requirement. Julia's voice was firm. One night, classical music, hand-picked guest list. You smile, you shake hands, you write some checks. Then it's done. I don't do galas. You do now. Or you lose $2 billion in the company you spent 15 years building. They stared at each other across the desk. Julia didn't blink. She never did. Fine, Alexander said. One night. 3 weeks from now, I'll handle the details. As Julia stood to leave, she paused at the door. And Alex, try to interact with Sophie when she's here. Your sister needs the support. Alexander didn't answer. Julia sighed and left. He turned back to his monitor, back to the security feeds, back to searching for a ghost who didn't want to be found. The day everything changed started like any other. Alexander woke with a headache and a low-grade fever, the first sign of weakness his body had shown in months. He canceled his meetings, told Julia he would work from home, retreated to his study with his laptop and a determination to power through. He was reviewing quarterly reports when he heard it. Nothing, absolute silence. But the silence had a quality to it now, a presence. Someone was in the house. He minimized his spreadsheet and pulled up the security feed on his secondary monitor. There, the living room camera. She was cleaning his antique oak desk with slow, careful strokes. Small, slighter than he had expected, dark hair pulled back in that practical ponytail, gray uniform that seemed designed to make her forgettable. She moved through the space like water flowing around the stones, never disturbing anything, simply existing in the gaps. The afternoon light, rare for November on the Oregon coast, suddenly broke through the clouds. It poured through the window in golden streams. It fell across her hands. Alexander stopped breathing. The ring was unmistakable. Copper wire twisted and bent in the clumsy way of a child who had never worked with metal before. At its center, a piece of sea glass, pale blue, worn smooth by ocean waves. The same pale blue as Alexander's eyes. The glass of water in his hand trembled. He set it down carefully, afraid he might drop it. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. No, it's not possible. It can't be her. But the ring, that ring, he would know it anywhere. Even after 32 years, even after a lifetime of trying to forget. 22 years ago, Mercy House Children's Home, Portland, Oregon. The junkyard behind the orphanage smelled like rust and broken promises. Sterling, just Sterling back then, no last name that mattered, was crouched behind a pile of scrap metal. 10 years old with dirty fingernails and a chip on his shoulder the size of the Pacific Ocean. He was supposed to be at dinner. Instead, he was working on something that would get him a beating if the house mothers found out. What are you making? He nearly jumped out of his skin, but it was just Willa. 8-year-old Willa Chen with her crooked braids and her hand-me-down dress and her eyes that saw everything. Go away, he said automatically. She didn't go away, she never did. Instead, she crouched down beside him. Her knees touched the dirty ground without hesitation. Is that a ring? It's supposed to be. He held up the mess of copper wire, frustration tightening his jaw. But I can't make it look right. It keeps coming out ugly. Willa reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a piece of glass worn smooth by the ocean, the pale blue of a summer sky. I found this on the beach trip, she said. Sister Mary said I couldn't keep it, but I hid it in my shoe. She pressed it into his palm. Her fingers were warm. Put this in the middle. Sterling stared at the sea glass, then at the girl who had given it to him. Something was happening in his chest, something warm and terrifying and so fragile he knew he would spend the rest of his life trying to protect it. When I grow up, he said, The words tumbled out before he could stop them. I'm going to be rich, really rich. And I'll buy you a real ring with a diamond as big as a goose egg. Willa wrinkled her nose. That sounds heavy. It'll be beautiful. I don't want a goose egg diamond. She pointed at the sea glass in his palm. I like this one. It's the color of your eyes. Sterling felt something shift, some fundamental understanding of the universe rearranging itself. I'll marry you, he said. When I'm rich, I promise. Willa smiled, a real smile, the kind she never showed anyone else. Okay, she said. I'll wait. 3 months later, she was gone, transferred to a different facility in the middle of the night. No warning, no goodbye. Sterling woke up one morning and her bed across the dormitory was empty. Stripped, like she had never been there at all. Sister Mary wouldn't tell him where she went, said it was confidential, said it was for the best, said Willa was in a better place now. Sterling was 10 years old. He didn't cry. Boys at Mercy House learned early that crying got you nowhere, but he made himself a promise in the dark of that dormitory. Someday when he was rich enough, powerful enough, important enough, he would find her. He would keep his promise. Alexander stared at the security feed, at the woman cleaning his desk, at the ring on her finger. 22 years. She had kept the ring for 22 years. He had become one of the richest men in America, had graced the covers of Forbes and Bloomberg, had built an empire from nothing through sheer force of will. And in all that time, he had never once tried to find her, had convinced himself that the boy who made copper rings in junkyards didn't exist anymore, had buried that boy under ambition and success in the armor he needed to survive. But she had kept the ring. The question hammered at his skull like a migraine. Does she know? Does she know who I am? Is this a coincidence? Is she here for money? For revenge? For something else entirely? He didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched as Emma finished cleaning his desk, gathered her supplies, and disappeared from view. His hands were shaking. Alexander Blackwood had not become a billionaire by acting rashly. He needed more information. He needed to understand her angle. He needed to test whether she recognized him, or whether he was reading meaning into copper wire and coincidence. He decided in that moment not to confront her. Not yet. He would watch. He would test. He would wait for her to reveal herself. The next morning, Alexander left a book on the coffee table. The Velveteen Rabbit. It was old, older than he was. The spine was cracked. The pages were yellowed. The cover showed a stuffed rabbit with button eyes and worn fur. They had read it together at Mercy House. Huddled in the corner of the common room while the other children fought over the television. Willa had cried at the ending. Sterling had pretended not to, but his eyes had been wet too. He positioned the book carefully, spine facing out, impossible to miss. Then he went to work and pulled up the security feed on his phone. She found it at 9:17 in the morning. The camera caught her in profile. She was dusting the bookshelf when she saw it. Her hands stilled, hovered over the book, trembling. Then slowly she picked it up. She held it against her chest, like something precious, like something she thought she had lost forever. Her fingers traced the cover. Her lips moved, forming words too quiet for the microphone to catch. Alexander watched from his office 70 miles away. His phone screen was cracked. He gripped it too hard. Emma stood there for a full minute, just holding the book. Then she placed it very carefully on the pillow of his sofa, the spot where he always rested his head. Not on the bookshelf where it belonged, on his pillow. She knows, Alexander thought. She has to know. But still, she said nothing, made no move to reveal herself, simply continued to care for him. Silently, invisibly, perfectly. The test continued. Test 2, a worn photograph tucked into a random book on his shelf. The only picture he had from Mercy House, taken at a Christmas party. 2 children grinning at the camera with candy canes in their hands. One boy with blue wheels on, one girl with crooked braids. Emma found it. She studied it for a long time. So long that Alexander thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just placed it on his nightstand, angled so he would see it first thing in the morning. Test 3. A radio playing the oldies station. The station they used to listen to through Mercy House's ancient speakers. The Carpenters. Elvis. Songs from before they were born. Emma found it. She turned up the volume slightly. Let the music drift through the house like a memory. Test 4. Alexander accidentally knocked over his coffee onto a stack of important documents. He left the mess and watched from his car. She rushed to save them, blotting the moisture with practiced efficiency. When she finished, she placed something small on top of the rescued papers. A peppermint candy, the cheap kind with red and white stripes. The cafeteria at Mercy House. The candy jar that Sister Mary kept locked in her office. The way they would sneak in during prayer time. Hearts pounding, palms sweating, stealing 2 or 3 mints they would make last for days. "If we get caught," Willa had whispered once, "I'll say I did it alone." "That's stupid," Sterling had said. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're going to be rich someday. You can't have a criminal record." She had believed in him when no one else did, when he didn't even believe in himself. And now she was here, caring for him, leaving candy on his paperwork like a message in a bottle. Alexander sat in his car in the parking garage and stared at the peppermint candy on his phone screen. His vision blurred. It took him a moment to realize he was crying. Before we continue, I want you to notice something. Alexander Blackwood just let a complete stranger into his fortress. A woman he has never seen. A woman who somehow knows exactly what he needs before he asks for it. In 1985, in a Portland orphanage, a 10-year-old boy made a promise to an 8-year-old girl. He promised her a diamond ring when he grew up. She said she didn't want diamonds. She wanted the copper ring he had made by hand. 32 years ago, they were separated without warning. He spent 3 decades searching. She spent 3 decades believing he was dead. What happens when 2 people who promised each other forever finally stand in the same room and don't recognize each other? What happens when love speaks a language that only 2 people understand? What happens when the richest man in Seattle realizes the most valuable thing he ever owned was something he made in a junkyard when he was 10 years old? Stay with me. The next 15 minutes will show you how close you can be to someone and still be worlds apart. How a copper ring and a piece of sea glass can carry more weight than all the money in the world. How sometimes the people we're searching for are the ones who have been taking care of us all along. This is a story about promises kept in silence, about love that waits decades, about 2 people who are about to rediscover that the best things we ever make are the things we make with our hands and our hearts when we have nothing else to give. Don't leave now. We're just getting started. 3 weeks into her employment, Emma came home to find Alexander Blackwood exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. She could see it in the way he had left his briefcase, dropped by the door instead of placed on the console table. His coat was on the floor. His shoes were kicked off in the middle of the foyer. These were not the habits of a man in control. These were the habits of a man at the end of his rope. Emma moved through the house in her usual silence, picked up the coat, arranged the shoes, carried the briefcase to his study. Then she went to the kitchen. She didn't have to think about what to make. The memory rose up unbidden. Mercy House cafeteria, long tables with metal legs, plastic trays, and soup that tasted like nothing and everything at the same time. Chicken broth, too much pepper, not enough meat, a few tired vegetables that had seen better days. It was cheap. It was simple. It was what they gave you when the budget was tight and the month was long. But it was warm. Emma made the soup exactly the way Sister Mary used to make it. She knew it wasn't fancy, knew it wouldn't impress anyone. But that wasn't the point. The point was comfort. The point was home. She left it on the counter in a plain white bowl. No garnish, no presentation, just soup, steam rising in the quiet kitchen. Then she disappeared. Alexander came downstairs at 9. He had intended to work through the night, had a presentation due in the morning, had 7 emails that needed responses before the Tokyo markets opened. But the smell stopped him. Chicken broth, pepper, something else he couldn't quite name. Memory. He found the bowl on the counter, stared at it for a long moment. This wasn't the kind of food his previous housekeepers had made. No truffle oil, no Wagyu beef, no microgreens arranged like modern art. This was cafeteria soup, poor people's soup, the kind of soup you made when you had nothing but you had to feed someone anyway. Alexander sat down at the counter, picked up the spoon. The first taste hit him like a fist to the chest. He was 10 years old again, sitting at a metal table in a room that smelled like bleach and loneliness. Willa was across from him, blowing on her soup because it was too hot. Her cheeks were pink from the steam. She was humming something under her breath. "You can have my crackers," she had said. "I'm not that hungry." She was always hungry. They were all always hungry. But she gave him her crackers anyway. Alexander ate the entire bowl. Then he sat at the counter for another hour, staring at the empty dish, feeling something crack open in his chest that he had spent 22 years keeping sealed. When he finally stood, his legs were shaky. He took the bowl to the sink, washed it himself, dried it, put it away. Then he went upstairs and pulled out a file he kept in his safe. A file he hadn't looked at in 3 years. Private investigator reports, dozens of them, dating back 17 years. Subject, Willa Grace Chen. Last known location, Portland, Oregon. Status, unknown. The trail had gone cold in 2007. The investigator had found records of her aging out of the foster system at 18, working minimum wage jobs, taking night classes at community college, then nothing. She had vanished into the kind of poverty that makes people invisible. Alexander had kept paying the investigator anyway, just in case, just in hope. But he had stopped reading the reports, had stopped believing he would ever find her. Now he spread them across his desk, started reading from the beginning, looking for something he had missed. Some clue, some connection. His phone buzzed. Julia. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, he answered. "What?" "We need to talk." Julia's voice had that tone, the one that meant she was about to ruin his night. "It's about the gala." "I don't want to talk about the gala." "Too bad. I'm coming over." She hung up before he could argue. Julia arrived 20 minutes later with a tablet and a look that said she meant business. She swept into his study without knocking. Took one look at the files spread across his desk, raised an eyebrow. "Should I ask?" "No." "Then I won't." She set the tablet down on top of the investigator reports. "The gala is in 5 days. We have 200 confirmed guests. Senators, CEOs, major donors. The press will be there. This is your chance to show everyone that you're stable, competent, and not actually a sociopath who fires people over scented candles." Alexander leaned back in his chair. "I'm stable and competent. The sociopath part is debatable." "This isn't funny, Alex. The tech venture merger is hanging by a thread. Marcus Webb is circling like a shark. If you don't show the board that you can play nice with others, they're going to push you out." "Let them try." Julia's expression softened, just slightly. "I know you hate these things. I know they feel fake. But sometimes we have to do things we hate to protect things we care about." "And what exactly do I care about?" "The company you built from nothing. The employees who depend on you. Your legacy." Alexander looked at the investigator reports under her tablet. At Willa's name typed in neat professional font. Legacy. What was legacy compared to a promise made in a junkyard? "Fine," he said. "I'll host the gala, but I'm not giving a speech." "You're giving a speech." "Julia. 3 minutes. You can do 3 minutes." They stared at each other. Julia's eyes were unrelenting. 3 minutes, Alexander agreed. Not a second longer. "Good." She picked up the tablet, glanced at the papers underneath. Her expression changed. "Alex, are you looking for someone?" "Old business. Nothing important." Julia studied him for a moment. She knew he was lying. She also knew better than to push. "Okay, I'll send you the guest list. Try to memorize at least a few names." After she left, Alexander looked back at the reports, at the last known address, a studio apartment in a neighborhood where rent was cheap and hope was cheaper. He had been 3 miles away from her for 3 years. 3 miles. And he had never known. Emma received the call at midnight. Helen's voice was tight with something that might have been excitement or stress. "I need you to coordinate the temporary staff for the Blackwood Charity Gala. Saturday night, big event, lots of moving parts." Emma sat up in bed. The small apartment was dark except for the streetlight coming through the thin curtains. "I'm not an event coordinator. You're the only person I trust who won't cause a disaster. Please, Emma, I'll pay you double." Emma thought about her rent, about the bills stacking up on her kitchen counter, about the fact that she was one emergency away from being homeless. "Okay," she said, "send me the details." After she hung up, she sat in the darkness for a long time, staring at the copper ring on her finger. The ring she had worn every single day for 22 years. She was going to be in the same room as Alexander Blackwood. Not invisible this time. Not hiding in shadows. Actually there. Where he could see her. Where he might recognize her. She touched the ring, turned it around her finger. The metal was warm from her skin. The sea glass caught the street light and threw tiny rainbows across the wall. What if he doesn't remember? What if he does remember, but doesn't care? What if the boy who made this ring died a long time ago, and all that's left is the cold billionaire who fires people over candles? Emma lay back down, stared at the ceiling, tried to sleep, couldn't. The Blackwood estate was transformed. Emma arrived at 3 in the afternoon to oversee the setup. Crystal chandeliers had been brought in and hung from the vaulted ceilings. White roses cascaded from every available surface. A string quartet was setting up in the corner of the ballroom. Waiters in black tie were receiving their final instructions from the catering manager. It looked like a magazine spread, like something from a world Emma had only ever seen from the outside. She wore her gray uniform, sensible shoes, hair pulled back, no makeup. She had learned long ago how to make herself invisible even when people were looking directly at her. The catering manager was a woman named Sandra, 50 years old, with the kind of competence that came from managing 1,000 events without a single mistake. She took one look at Emma and nodded. "You're Helen's girl." "Yes." "Good. I need you to manage the staff rotation. Make sure no one stands idle. Keep the trays moving. Watch for empty glasses. Think you can handle that?" "Yes." "Then let's get to work." The next 3 hours passed in controlled chaos. Flowers needed adjusting. The sound system needed testing. 2 waiters called in sick and had to be replaced. A senator's wife had dietary restrictions that required last-minute menu changes. Emma moved through it all with quiet efficiency, solving problems before they became disasters, staying out of the way, making sure everything ran smoothly. She didn't see Alexander, but she felt his presence, like a weight in the air, like static electricity before a storm. At 6, the guests started arriving. Emma retreated to the kitchen. Her job was behind the scenes, invisible, the way she preferred. Through the kitchen door, she could hear the swell of conversation, the clink of glasses, the string quartet playing Vivaldi. It sounded expensive. It sounded like a world she would never belong to. At 6:30, Sandra came into the kitchen. "I need someone on the floor," she said. "Michael twisted his ankle. I need you to take over his section." Emma felt her stomach drop. "I'm not trained for front of house." "You'll be fine. Just keep moving. Stay professional. Don't make eye contact unless someone addresses you directly." Before Emma could argue, Sandra was pushing a tray of champagne flutes into her hands and guiding her toward the door. The ballroom took Emma's breath away. 200 people in evening wear, diamonds catching the light, conversations flowing like water. And at the center of it all, standing near the fireplace, was Alexander Blackwood. He wore a tuxedo that fit like it had been made for him, because it had been. His dark hair was perfect. His jaw was sharp. He looked like he had been carved from marble. He looked like a stranger. Emma felt her chest tighten. "That's not Sterling," she told herself. "Sterling died 22 years ago. This is Alexander Blackwood, billionaire, CEO. The man who fired 5 people over candles. He's not your Sterling." She moved through the crowd, offering champagne, collecting empty glasses, staying invisible. But her eyes kept drifting back to him. She watched him shake hands, accept compliments, smile with his mouth but not his eyes. He was playing a role, performing for an audience, and he looked miserable. The evening stretched on. Emma's feet ached. Her face hurt from the professional neutral expression she had been holding for hours. She was refilling her tray in the kitchen when she heard it. A child's voice, high-pitched, uncertain. "Excuse me, do you work here?" Emma turned. A little girl stood in the kitchen doorway, maybe 6 years old, dark curly hair, velvet dress that was too fancy for someone so small. She looked lost. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, kneeling down to the girl's level. "I can't find my uncle." Mom said he's here, but everyone is so tall and I can't see. What's your uncle's name? Alexander Blackwood. Emma's heart stopped. She looked at this child, really looked, saw the shape of her eyes, the line of her bone, family resemblance. What's your name? Emma asked softly. Sophie. Okay, Sophie, let me help you find him. She took Sophie's hand, led her back into the ballroom, scanned the crowd until she found Alexander. He was talking to an older couple, looking trapped. Emma approached from the side, waited for a gap in conversation, then spoke quietly. Mr. Blackwood, someone here to see you. Alexander turned, his eyes landed on Sophie first, then on Emma. For a moment, time stopped. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something flickered. Recognition? Confusion? She couldn't tell. Sophie, he said, his voice was carefully neutral. What are you doing in the kitchen? I was looking for you. Everyone's boring. The older couple laughed. Alexander's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Thank you, he said to Emma, looking directly at her for the first time, for finding her. Emma nodded, stepped back, disappeared into the crowd, but she could feel his eyes on her back. The accident happened at 11:47. Emma was near the fireplace, collecting glasses from a side table. Eleanor Whitmore was holding court nearby, fourth glass of champagne in hand, wearing a crimson gown that cost more than Emma made in a year. Eleanor was in the middle of a story, gesturing dramatically, her voice carrying over the string quartet. The glass slipped, or she gestured too hard, or she simply wasn't paying attention. Whatever the reason, the wine arced through the air like blood. Emma moved without thinking. She was closer than anyone else, could see the trajectory, could see where it was going to land. She stepped between Eleanor and the spray of red wine. The liquid hit her chest, soaked through her gray uniform, stained it instantly and permanently. The conversation around them stopped. Eleanor's face went from surprise to embarrassment to anger in the space of a heartbeat. You clumsy fool! Her voice cut through the suddenly quiet room. Look what you've done. Emma stood perfectly still, face neutral, professional. Mrs. Whitmore, I apologize. Apologize? You ruined my evening. Eleanor was getting louder, drawing more attention. Do you have any idea how much this moment is worth? People were staring now. Phones were coming out. Emma could see the cameras pointed at her. More than you'll earn in your entire pathetic life, I imagine, Eleanor continued. Emma didn't flinch. She had learned a long time ago how to absorb this kind of rage, how to stand there and take it without breaking. But Eleanor wasn't done. Her eyes fell to Emma's hand, to the ring. And what is that? Eleanor's voice dripped with disgust. Is that trash? Are you wearing garbage as jewelry? She grabbed Emma's wrist, yanked her hand up for inspection. My God, it is trash. Copper wire and a piece of broken glass. I knew servants were desperate, but this is... The ring slipped. Emma felt it go, felt the metal slide off her finger. The ring that had been loose for years, worn thin from 2 decades of constant wear. It fell in slow motion, tumbled through the air, hit the marble floor. Clink. The sound was small, barely audible over the music and the murmur of 200 people. But Emma heard it like a gunshot, like the end of the world. She looked down, saw the copper ring on the floor, saw 22 years of faith and hope and waiting lying there among the shards of a broken dream. And then she heard footsteps. Fast, determined. Someone was moving through the crowd. Emma looked up. Alexander Blackwood was crossing the ballroom. His face was carved from stone. His eyes were locked on the ring, on her. People scrambled out of his way. A senator tried to catch his attention. Alexander ignored him, stepped around a waiter, pushed past a cluster of board members. The entire room was watching now. Julia was near the entrance. Emma saw her face, saw the horror, the panic. This was not the script. This was not the plan. But Alexander didn't care. He reached Eleanor, reached Emma, didn't look at either of them. He knelt. The entire ballroom gasped. Alexander Blackwood, billionaire, CEO, one of the most powerful men in Seattle, on his knees on the marble floor. He picked up the copper ring with fingers that were shaking, pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket, Carefully, reverently, wiped away the dust. The string quartet had stopped playing. The silence was absolute. Alexander stood, turned to face Eleanor Whitmore. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. He never needed to raise his voice. Mrs. Whitmore. Each word was precise, each syllable a small blade. You may purchase this entire house if you wish. You may purchase everything in it. You may purchase the ground it stands on. He took Emma's hand, gently, like she was made of glass. He slid the ring back onto her finger. But you do not have enough money in all your accounts to purchase the right to touch this ring. He looked directly into Eleanor's eyes. Its value exceeds the combined assets of every company your husband has ever owned. Eleanor's face went from red to white. Your car is waiting outside, Alexander said. I suggest you use it. He turned his back on her, faced Emma. She was staring at him, eyes wide, face pale, the wine stain spreading across her uniform like a wound. Alexander, she whispered. His birth name, the name no one had called him in 20 years. His eyes closed, just for a moment. When they opened, they were wet. Not here, he said. His voice was rough. Not now, but soon. He released her hand, walked away, left her standing there in a ballroom full of people, with a copper ring on her finger and a story that was about to go viral. Behind her, Emma heard Sophie's small voice. Miss Emma? Why is everyone crying? Umpal looked down. The little girl was standing beside her, looking up with curious eyes. Because sometimes, Emma said softly, sometimes people keep promises. Was that Uncle Alex's promise? Yes, sweetheart. A very old promise. Sophie took her hand. The one with the ring held it tight, and Emma, who had spent 22 years being invisible, suddenly felt very, very seen. The ballroom erupted, not in anger, not in scandal, in applause. It started with one person, then another, then the entire room was clapping. Some people were crying, others were smiling. A few were on their phones, already posting videos with hashtags. Julia was in the corner, face in her hands, but when she looked up, she was laughing, actually laughing. The evening dissolved into chaos after that. Eleanor left in a fury. The press descended like vultures. Guests crowded around Emma, asking questions, taking photos, wanting to know the story. Sandra pulled her away, back to the kitchen, gave her a clean shirt, a glass of water, a chair to sit in. You okay? Sandra asked. Emma touched the ring, still on her finger, still there. I don't know, she said honestly. That was something, Sandra said. In 30 years of doing this, I have never seen anything like that. Emma laughed. It came out shaky. I should probably go. Yeah, you probably should, before the press finds you. Emma changed quickly, left through the service entrance, the same way she had entered. But everything was different now. She drove home in a daze, parked her car, climbed the stairs to her apartment, sat on her bed in the darkness, looked at the ring. Alexander Blackwood had knelt in front of 200 people, had publicly declared the value of something worth nothing to anyone but them, had called her by his name, his real name, Alexander, not Alex, not Mr. Blackwood. Alexander, the boy who made her a ring in a junkyard, the boy who promised her forever after 32 years, after becoming someone else, after building an empire and a reputation and a fortress around his heart. He remembered. Emma's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Please don't leave. We need to talk. You know where to find me. The boy you knew is still here. He's just been waiting, waiting for you to come back, waiting to keep his promise. Please, give me a chance to explain, to apologize, to show you that some things don't change even when everything else does. The ring you're wearing is the best thing I ever made. Not the company, not the money, not any of it. Just that ring, and the promise that came with it. I'm sorry it took me 22 years. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. But I'm not sorry you're here now. Please stay. Please give me a chance. The address is below if you want to talk. Or you can walk away and I'll understand. But please know that I never forgot. Not for a single day. Not for a single moment. You were always there, in every decision, in every success, in every failure. You were the voice telling me I could. You were the reason I tried, and you're the only thing that makes any of this worth anything at all. Below the message was an address, his home. Emma stared at the screen until it went dark. Then she stood up, put on her coat, and drove back to the mansion on the cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Back to the boy who had promised her diamonds and given her copper instead. Back to the only home she had ever really known. Before we continue, I want you to understand something. What you just witnessed wasn't just a public declaration. It was a man choosing between the life he built and the life he promised. Between the fortress and the foundation. Between the armor and the truth. Alexander Blackwood knelt in front of everyone who mattered in his world, and he chose a copper ring over all of it. That's the kind of choice that changes everything. That's the kind of choice that can't be taken back. In the next part of our story, you'll see what happens when Emma walks back through those doors. When two people who have been speaking in silence finally use words. When promises made by children have to be kept by adults who have lived entire lives in the space between. Stay with me, because the hardest part isn't making the promise. It's keeping it when everything in your life tells you to let go. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe that copper wire and sea glass can hold more weight than all the diamonds in the world. Emma drove through the night with shaking hands. The Seattle streets were empty at this hour. Rain had started falling, soft at first, then harder. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat. Like a countdown. She had left the gala 4 hours ago, had gone home, had sat in the darkness of her apartment trying to process what had happened, trying to understand how the invisible woman had suddenly become the center of attention in a room full of people who mattered. But none of them mattered. Not really. The only person who mattered was the man who had knelt on marble floors and declared that copper wire was worth more than empires. Emma's phone sat in the passenger seat, the message still glowing on the screen. She had read it 17 times, had memorized every word, every comma, every space between the letters. He remembered. After 22 years of silence and distance and separate lives lived in parallel universes that never touched, he remembered. The question that haunted her wasn't whether he remembered. It was whether remembering was enough. The Blackwood estate appeared through the rain like something from a dream. All glass and steel and sharp edges. The lights were on, every window glowing against the darkness. It looked less like a fortress now, more like a lighthouse, like something calling her home. Emma parked in the circular driveway, not the service entrance this time. The front door, where guests arrived, where people who mattered were welcomed. She sat in her car for 5 minutes. 10, 15. The rain drummed on the roof, the engine ticked as it cooled. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, her knuckles went white. She could leave. She could start the car and drive away and disappear back into the kind of invisibility she had perfected over 22 years. He would never find her. Not if she didn't want to be found. But the ring on her finger was warm, and she had spent 2 decades being invisible. Maybe it was time to be seen. Emma got out of the car. The rain soaked through her coat immediately. November in Seattle was cold and wet and unforgiving, but she barely felt it. She walked to the front door, raised her hand to knock. The door opened before her knuckles touched wood. Alexander stood there, still in his tuxedo. The bow tie was gone. The jacket was unbuttoned. His hair was disheveled like he had been running his hands through it. His eyes were red. He had been crying. Alexander Blackwood, the Ice King of Seattle, the man who fired people without blinking, the billionaire who could buy and sell companies with a phone call. He had been crying. They stared at each other across the threshold, rain falling between them like a curtain. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Alexander stepped back. "Come in," he said. His voice was rough. "Please." Emma crossed the threshold. The foyer looked different at night, softer somehow. The harsh edges were gentled by lamplight. The cedar wood candles were burning. She could smell them, could smell memory and promise in all the years between then and now. Alexander closed the door. The sound of rain became muffled, distant. They stood in the foyer, not speaking, not touching, just existing in the same space for the first time in 22 years, with nothing between them but truth. "You came," Alexander said finally. "You asked me to." "I didn't think you would." Emma touched the ring on her finger, turned it slowly. "You knelt in front of 200 people." "I would have knelt in front of 2,000. Wait, Nyan. The question hung in the air like smoke. Alexander looked at her. Really looked. Not the way a billionaire looks at his housekeeper. Not the way a stranger looks at someone serving champagne. He looked at her the way Sterling had looked at Willa in a junkyard 22 years ago. Like she was the only real thing in a world made of cardboard. Because, he said slowly, some things are worth more than dignity, worth more than reputation, worth more than everything I've spent 22 years building. A copper ring. Not the ring. His voice dropped. The promise. Emma felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them back. I thought you were dead. The words came out broken. All the years of grief condensed into 5 syllables. Alexander's face crumpled. What? Sister Mary told me you were adopted. Said you went to boarding school. Then 5 years later, I heard there was a fire. A boy named Alexander Reed died. Her voice was shaking now. I thought I had lost you. I thought the promise died with you. But you kept the ring. It was all I had left. Alexander closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were swimming. Willa, God, I'm so sorry. Don't call me that. Emma's voice was sharp. Willa died when they took her away from Mercy House. When they threw her into a van in the middle of the night and drove her to a place where nobody knew her name, where nobody cared. Then what do I call you? Emma, my middle name. It's the only thing I kept that was mine. Alexander nodded slowly. Emma. The name sounded different in his mouth, like he was tasting it, learning the shape of it. I looked for you, he said. For years, I hired investigators, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars tracking every lead, every rumor, every possibility. Emma's breath caught. When? I started when I was 25. The moment I had enough money to hire someone good, I thought it would be easy. How many Willa Chens could there be in the foster system? Apparently more than you thought. The trail went cold in 2007. You had changed your name, married someone, divorced, moved 6 times, worked jobs that didn't keep records. You had made yourself invisible. I'm good at that. Too good. Alexander's voice cracked. I was 3 miles away from you for 3 years, Emma. 3 miles. I drove past your neighborhood twice a week on my way to board meetings, and I never knew. The weight of that hung between them. 3 miles, the distance you could walk in an hour. The distance that might as well have been the width of the ocean. Why didn't you try harder, Emma asked. The question she had been holding for hours, for days, for 22 years. Alexander flinched like she had struck him. Because I was a coward. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He ran a hand through his hair. I convinced myself that you had moved on, that you had built a life, that showing up would be selfish, that the boy you remembered didn't exist anymore. Did he? I don't know. I spent so many years burying him, becoming someone else, someone harder, someone who couldn't be hurt because he didn't feel anything at all. Alexander looked at his hands. I built a fortress, Emma, around my heart, around my life, and I told myself it was for protection. But really, it was just a prison. Emma stepped closer. The distance between them was less than 3 feet now, less than 3 miles. Close enough to see the silver in his hair that hadn't been there when he was 10, the lines around his eyes from years of not sleeping, the scar on his jaw from some accident she would never know about. I made soup, she said. Alexander looked up. What? 3 weeks ago, I made you soup, the kind we used to eat at Mercy House. Too much pepper, not enough meat, and you ate the entire bowl. You were testing me. We were testing each other. Emma held up her hand. The copper ring caught the light. I've been wearing this for 32 years, every single day. I wore it when I got married, when I got divorced, when my mother died, when I had nothing left but a studio apartment and 3 jobs that barely paid rent. I never took it off. Why? Because you promised. Her voice broke. You promised you would find me, and even when everyone said you were dead, even when logic said I should let go, I couldn't. Because this ring was the only thing that ever made me feel like I mattered, like someone saw me, like I was worth keeping a promise for. Alexander reached out, slowly, like he was afraid she would disappear if he moved too fast. His fingers touched hers, traced the copper wire. The sea glass. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry it took me this long. Are you? Emma looked at him directly. Or are you sorry you got caught? Sorry that I showed up and made your tidy life complicated? No. The word was fierce. No, you're the best thing that's happened to me in 22 years. You came back, Emma. You walked into my house and you made it feel like home for the first time since I can remember. You knew exactly what I needed before I knew I needed it. You spoke to me in a language only we understand. Through soup and candy and old books. Through love. Alexander's voice dropped to almost nothing. Through the kind of love that doesn't need words because it's been speaking the whole time if anyone bothered to listen. Emma felt tears spill over. She didn't bother wiping them away. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Be seen. Be known. I've spent so long being invisible that I don't know how to exist in the light. Then we'll learn together. Alexander took both her hands now. I don't know how to be human anymore, Emma. I've spent so long being the Ice King that I forgot what warmth feels like. But when you're here, when you're close, I remember. I remember what it was like to be Sterling, to be that boy who believed that copper wire was enough, that promises mattered, that love was worth more than all the money in the world. Are you still him? Emma asked. Or did he die somewhere between the junkyard and the mansion? I don't know, but I want to find out. With you. They stood there, hands clasped. The rain outside had softened to a whisper. I have something for you, Alexander said finally. Alexander led Emma through the house, not to the living room where guests were entertained, not to the study where business was conducted. He led her upstairs, to a room she had never seen, his bedroom. Emma hesitated at the threshold. This was crossing a line, moving from professional to personal, from invisible to intimate. But Alexander wasn't looking at the bed. He was walking to a closet, opening a safe hidden behind suits that cost more than cars. He pulled out a box, small, worn, the kind of box that had been carried across years and miles and the distance between who you were and who you became. He brought it to her, opened it. Inside was a spool of copper wire, bright, new. Next to it, a pair of small wire cutters, and beneath them, folded carefully, a photograph. The same photograph she had found weeks ago. Two children with candy canes, grinning at a camera like they had won the lottery. I bought this wire 3 years ago, Alexander said, when the investigator told me the trail had gone cold, when I thought I would never find you. I bought it anyway. Kept it. Just in case. Just in hope. Emma touched the wire. It was cool under her fingers. What were you going to do with it? Make you a new ring. Show you that I still remembered how. That the boy who made promises in junkyards was still here somewhere under all the expensive suits and cold boardrooms. And now, Alexander knelt. Not like he had at the gala. Not for show. Not for an audience. He knelt because some moments required being on your knees, required humility, required understanding that what you were asking for was bigger than pride. I'm not giving you diamonds, he said. You never wanted diamonds. No. I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet. Not until you're ready. Not until you believe that this is real and not just nostalgia or loneliness, or two people clinging to a memory of who they used to be. Emma's breath caught. Then what are you asking? Teach me. Alexander held up the wire cutters. Teach me how to make another ring. Let me prove that I still know how, that my hands can still create something beautiful even after years of only taking apart and putting together companies and deals and mergers. Alexander, let me earn you this time, Emma. Not with money, not with houses or cars or anything you can buy. Let me earn you the way Sterling tried to earn Willa, with copper wire and clumsy fingers and a promise that this time I won't wait 22 years to keep it. Emma knelt down across from him. The floor was hardwood, expensive. It hurt her knees. She didn't care. Show me your hands, she said. Alexander held them out. They were shaking slightly. The hands of a man who signed billion-dollar contracts, who shook hands with presidents, who could make or break careers with a phone call. Emma took them, turned them over, looked at the palms. These aren't the hands of a 10-year-old boy anymore, she said. No, they're scarred, calloused in different places. They've forgotten what it's like to work with nothing but hope and determination. Yes, so we'll have to teach them to remember. She picked up the wire, cut a length of it. The metal was cold, unyielding. It didn't want to bend. You start with the memory, Emma said softly. You remember what it felt like, the weight of it, the resistance, the way it fought you until you learned its language. Alexander took the wire. His fingers were clumsy at first, too forceful. The wire kinked, bent wrong. Softer, Emma guided, her hands over his. You're not trying to control it. You're asking it to become something. Slowly, carefully, they worked together. Her fingers remembered what his had forgotten, the twist, the loop. Now, Alexander said, we figure out how to build a life. Not in a junkyard, not in a mansion, somewhere in between, somewhere real. 6 months later, Emma stood in what used to be an abandoned community center in Portland and tried not to cry. The building had been empty for 5 years, boarded up, tagged with graffiti, the kind of place you walk past without seeing because poverty had a way of making people invisible. But now it was clean. The walls were painted, the windows were fixed. There was furniture, computers, a kitchen, sleeping quarters upstairs for kids who needed a safe place to stay. The sign above the door read, Mercy House Legacy Foundation. You okay? Alexander stood beside her. He was wearing jeans, a simple sweater, no suit, no tie. He looked younger, more like Sterling than Alexander. I'm overwhelmed, Emma admitted. Good overwhelmed or bad overwhelmed? I don't know yet. They had spent the past 6 months building this. Not just the building, the entire foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to foster care reform, to helping kids age out of the system, to making sure no child spent 22 years feeling invisible. Alexander had committed 30% of his personal wealth. Emma had quit her 3 jobs and taken a position as executive director. Together, they had hired a staff of former foster kids, people who understood what it meant to fall through the cracks. Today was the opening. In 30 minutes, the first wave of kids would arrive. Teenagers aging out of group homes, young adults who had nowhere to go. Kids like Sterling and Willa had been. Kids who needed someone to believe that copper wire could be just as valuable as diamonds. Nervous? Alexander asked. Terrified. He took her hand, the one with the ring. You're going to be amazing. We're going to be amazing, Emma corrected. This isn't just me. This is us. Us. Alexander said the word like he was tasting it. I like that. A car pulled up by outside, then another, then a small bus with the logo of a local group home. The kids started arriving. Emma watched them file in, saw the suspicion in their eyes, the walls they had built, the way they held themselves like they expected to be disappointed, expected this to be temporary, expected the adults to give up eventually because that's what adults always did. She recognized that look, had worn it herself for years. Welcome, Emma said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. My name is Emma. This is Alexander. We're both former foster kids. We both aged out of the system. We both know what it's like to feel like nobody cares whether you exist or disappear. The kids exchanged glances, skeptical but listening. This place exists because of a promise, Emma continued. A promise made 22 years ago by 2 kids who had nothing but each other. A promise that got broken when the system separated them. A promise that took 2 decades to keep. She held up her hand, showed them the copper ring. This ring isn't worth anything to anyone except us. It's made of wire someone threw away, glass the ocean didn't want. But it's the most valuable thing I own, because it represents something that money can't buy. What? A girl in the back, maybe 16, arms crossed defensively. Hope, Emma said simply. Hope that promises matter, that people can keep them even when everything says they shouldn't, that you are worth keeping a promise for. The girl's arms loosened slightly. Alexander stepped forward. We're not going to lie to you. This isn't a magic solution. We can't fix everything, can't erase the posteben, can't give you back the childhoods you deserved. But we can give you resources, support, a place to come when you have nowhere else to go. And most importantly, we can see you. He looked at each kid individually. made eye contact. You're not invisible. Not here, not to us. The room was quiet. Then the girl in the back spoke again. Why should we believe you? Because, Emma said, I've been where you are. I know what it's like to be invisible for so long you forget you're real. To work 3 jobs and still barely survive. To watch everyone else build lives while you're just trying to make it through the day. I know, and I'm not going to insult you by pretending I have all the answers, but I can promise you this. She walked closer. I will show up. Every day, for as long as it takes, I will see you. I will remember your name, and I will believe that you are worth the effort even on the days when you don't believe it yourself. The girl's eyes were wet. That's a big promise. Then hold me to it. Emma held out her hand. I'm Emma. What's your name? The girl hesitated, then took Emma's hand. Maya. Welcome, Maya. Let me show you around. The day passed in a blur. Kids arrived, forms were filled out, tours were given. Some kids left after an hour. Others stayed all day. A few asked if they could come back tomorrow. Emma said yes to all of them. By evening, she was exhausted, exhilarated, terrified, hopeful. All at once, Alexander found her in the kitchen. She was making soup, the same soup she had made for him months ago. Too much pepper, not enough meat. How many are we feeding, he asked. 12 tonight, could be more tomorrow, could be less, I don't know yet. Then we'll make enough for 20. They worked side by side, chopping vegetables, stirring broth, not speaking, just existing in the comfortable silence of 2 people who had learned to communicate without words. Sophie appeared in the doorway, Alexander's niece, 7 years old now. She had been spending more time at the foundation, helping out, being the kind of kid who saw other kids and didn't look away. And Emma? Sophie had started calling her that 3 months ago. Emma still wasn't used to it. There's a girl crying in the bathroom. She won't come out. Emma wiped her hands on a towel. Which bathroom? Upstairs, the one with the blue door. Emma climbed the stairs, found the bathroom, knocked softly. Maya, it's Emma. Can I come in? Silence. You don't have to let me in, but I'm going to sit out here until you're ready, just so you know you're not alone. Emma sat down, leaned against the wall, waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the door opened. Maya stood there, eyes red, mascara smeared. I don't know why I'm crying. That's okay. Sometimes we cry without knowing why. Maya's voice broke. This place, you, him, that little girl, it's too much, it's too good, and I keep waiting for the part where it gets taken away. Emma stood. Can I hug you? Maya nodded. Emma wrapped her arms around this girl who was trying so hard to be strong, who had probably been strong for so long she forgot what it felt like to be held. I'm not going to take this away, Emma whispered. I promise. Everyone promises. Then they leave. I know because people promised me too, and then they left, and I learned to expect nothing so I wouldn't be disappointed. But Maya, listen to me. Emma pulled back, looked the girl in the eyes. Some promises are worth keeping, even when it's hard. Even when it takes 22 years. This is one of those promises. You are worth this. Maya cried harder, but this time it was the kind of crying that released something, that let go of something heavy. Emma held her, rocked her slightly, hummed something under her breath, the same song Sister Mary used to hum at Mercy House. When Maya finally calmed down, they went downstairs together. The kitchen smelled like soup. The table was set. 12 kids sat around it. Sophie was telling some story about school that had everyone laughing. Alexander looked up when Emma entered. Their eyes met across the room. He mouthed, "You okay?" She nodded, more than okay. This was what the copper ring had been promising all along. Not just romance, not just 2 people finding each other again, but family, built from broken pieces, held together by promises kept and soup shared, and the understanding that being seen was sometimes the greatest gift you could give. They ate dinner together. 12 kids, 2 adults, 1 7-year-old who insisted on saying grace, even though half the kids groaned. It was chaotic, loud, messy. It was perfect. The Blackwood estate had changed. Emma stood in what used to be the formal living room and smiled. Plants now filled the windows. Photographs covered the walls. Not expensive art, just snapshots, memories, proof that life was being lived here. Pictures from Mercy House, the junkyard, Portland streets, the foundation opening, Maya's high school graduation, Sophie's 8th birthday. A framed copy of the Velveteen Rabbit held together with tape sat on the mantel. Emma touched the copper ring on her finger, still there, always there, but now there was another ring beside it. Simple gold band. She had married Alexander 3 months ago. Courthouse ceremony. Maya and Sophie as witnesses. No press, no gala, just promises spoken quietly and meant deeply. Alexander walked into the room. He was on a video call. Board meeting. He wore a suit jacket over a t-shirt, professional on top, comfortable underneath. He had learned to balance both worlds. His left hand rested on the back of the chair. The copper ring he had made 6 months ago sat next to his wedding band, slightly crooked, imperfect. Exactly right. Emma watched him finish his meeting, watched him be the CEO and the man who made soup on Tuesdays and read bedtime stories to kids who stayed over from the foundation. He closed his laptop, looked at her, smiled. Meeting go well? She asked. Well enough. The board wants me to consider another merger. And? I told them I'd think about it, but only if it doesn't interfere with foundation work. Emma crossed the room, settled into his lap. Their rings clinked together, copper on copper, gold on gold. When did you become the person who prioritizes nonprofit work over billion-dollar deals? She teased. Around the same time I remembered that the best things in life are made of copper wire and hope. The doorbell rang. Sophie came running down the stairs. I'll get it. She opened the door. A social worker stood there with a teenage boy, maybe 14, thin, scared, holding a garbage bag that probably contained everything he owned. This is Marcus, the social worker said. He needs a place to stay for a few days while we sort out his placement. Emma stood, walked to the door, saw herself in this boy's eyes, saw Sterling, saw every kid who had ever felt invisible. Hi, Marcus, she said gently. I'm Emma. This is my husband, Alexander. And this is Sophie. Come in. Let me show you to your room. Marcus looked suspicious. My room? We have 3 guest rooms upstairs. Kids from the foundation stay here sometimes when they need to. You are welcome to one of them, for as long as you need. Why? Because, Emma said, someone once made me a promise when I had nothing. And promises like that, they don't just belong to the people who make them. They belong to everyone who needs them. She held out her hand, showed him the copper ring. See this? It's not worth anything to anyone except me. But it taught me that value isn't about money. It's about meaning. And you have meaning, Marcus, whether you believe it right now or not. The boy's eyes filled with tears. He didn't take her hand, not yet, but he nodded. Come on, Sophie said brightly. I'll show you the cool room. It has a window seat and everything. She took Marcus's garbage bag. Let him upstairs like it was the most natural thing in the world to welcome strangers into your home and treat them like family. The social worker watched them go, then turned to Emma. Thank you. Most families won't take emergency placements, especially teenagers. We're not most families, Alexander said. He had joined Emma at the door, put his arm around her waist. This is what we do. After the social worker left, Alexander and Emma stood in the foyer. The same foyer where she had arrived soaking wet 6 months ago, where he had opened the door and let her back into his life. We're collecting kids, Emma said. We're keeping promises. Same thing. Alexander kissed the top of her head. How many do you think we can fit? In the house? In the foundation? In our hearts? All of the above. Emma thought about it, about the space they had, the resources, the love that had been dormant for so long it had calcified into ice. But ice melts, and underneath there was always warmth waiting. As many as need us, she said finally. We'll make room. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She got up, walked through the house, checked on Marcus. He was asleep in the guest room. Sophie had left a stuffed animal on his pillow, a rabbit, worn from love. Emma smiled, closed the door quietly. She found Alexander in the kitchen. making soup at midnight because that's what you did when someone new arrived. You fed them, you gave them something warm, you showed them that this place, this family, this life was real. Can't sleep either? Emma asked. Wanted to have this ready for tomorrow, in case Marcus is hungry. Emma joined him at the stove. They worked together, adding vegetables, adjusting seasoning, not speaking. The comfortable silence of two people who had learned that words were sometimes unnecessary. When the soup was simmering, they sat at the kitchen counter. The same counter where Alexander had eaten soup 6 months ago and recognized home. Do you ever regret it? Emma asked. Giving up the Ice King reputation? Letting the world see that you're human? Alexander thought about it. No, that person, he was surviving. But he wasn't living. I'd rather be human and messy and surrounded by kids who need us than perfect and cold and alone. Even though it's complicated, especially because it's complicated, the best things always are. Emma touched her rings, both of them, copper and gold, past and present, promise and fulfillment. 32 years, she said, from a junkyard to this. Was it worth the wait? Every second. Alexander took her hand. I love you. I loved you when we were 10 and 8. I loved you when we were 10 and 8. I loved you through 32 years of searching. And I love you now. Messy, complicated, real. I love you too. Both versions of you, Sterling and Alexander. The boy who made promises and the man who keeps them. They sat in the kitchen as the soup simmered and the house settled, and somewhere upstairs, a boy who had been invisible was learning what it meant to be seen. This was the promise. Not diamonds, not mansions, not wealth or power or any of the things the world said mattered. Just copper wire and sea glass and soup made with too much pepper. Just hands that remembered how to create instead of destroy. Just two people who understood that value had nothing to do with price tags and everything to do with keeping promises when it would have been easier to forget them. This was what Sterling had been trying to tell Willa 22 years ago in that junkyard. That love wasn't about what you could buy. It was about what you were willing to build. And they were building something beautiful. One copper ring at a time, one kid at a time, one promise kept after another. Until the mansion on the cliff stopped being a fortress and became a home. Until the invisible became seen. Until the broken learned that being broken was just the first step toward being made whole. The soup was ready. Emma tasted it. Too much pepper, not enough meat. Perfect. She smiled at Alexander. He smiled back. And somewhere in the rafters of a house that had once been empty, hope settled in like it had always belonged there. Because it had. It just took 32 years and a copper ring to remember. Some promises are worth the wait. Some rings are worth more than diamonds. And some families are built not from blood, but from the simple, radical act of showing up for each other again and again and again. Until invisible becomes seen. Until lost becomes found. Until copper becomes gold. Not because the metal changed, but because the hands holding it finally understood what value really meant. This is where our story ends, not with fairy tale perfection, but with messy, beautiful reality. With soup simmering and kids sleeping and two people who spent 22 years finding their way back to each other. With a foundation that will help hundreds of kids who thought they were invisible learn that they are worth being seen. With a promise made in a junkyard that changed everything. Because sometimes the smallest acts of love are the ones that echo the loudest. Sometimes a ring made of copper wire and sea glass is worth more than all the diamonds in Tiffany's. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep a promise made when you were 10 years old and had nothing but hope. Alexander and Emma kept that promise. And in keeping it, they built something bigger than either of them ever imagined. A family, a foundation, a future, all starting with copper wire, all held together by love, all proving that the best things in life are the things we make with our own hands when we have nothing else to give. This is the story of the copper ring promise, and it's only just beginning.